From the time before Hitler was born, the story begins. Alois, his father, was an illegitimate child of Maria Anna Schickel-Gruber, a peasant who was 42 years old at the time their child was born. The only way she was able to provide for herself was by working as a housekeeper for wealthy Jewish families in Austria. She had never experienced marriage. As a result of Maria's decision to leave the name of Eloise's father blank on the baptism certificate, there is no way for anyone to determine who Hitler's biological grandpa actually is. After some time had passed, Maria tied the knot with a guy whose name was Johann Georg Hadler. As a result, she and Alois both adopted his surname into their own. However, as the priest was writing their marriage certificate, he had the mistake of spelling their last name Hitler instead. This is a moniker that refers to someone who resides in a hut. Despite the fact that it is not exactly the most fitting surname, they have chosen to continue using it for whatever reason. During the time that Alois was only 10 years old, Maria passed away at the age of 51. He went on to live on the farm that belonged to his stepfather's family, where he put forth a lot of effort to earn his living. While he was still a youngster, he worked as an apprentice for a cobbler and mastered the technique of creating leather goods. He had a strong desire to succeed, and as a result, he was hired by the Austrian Ministry of Finance. Furthermore, this placed him squarely among the middle class. Hitler, Alois, had 2 previous marriages and divorces before he finally tied the knot with Clara Puzzle, after giving birth to 2 children who passed away while they were still infants. They eventually gave birth to a son who was healthy on April 20, 1889. Adolf Hitler was the name they gave him. In the year 1894, they later welcomed a second son, a lad named Edmund. Since he was a very young child, Hitler exhibited characteristics of defiance and sloth, and he did not perform well in school. He was a man who was prone to anger, and when his son misbehaved, his father would frequently beat him into submission. His mother, on the other hand, was extremely protective of him and would always show him love without conditions, regardless of how poorly he acted when he was 8 years old. As soon as he started singing in the choir at his church, his mother gushed over him and told him that he was the most gifted youngster in the congregation. She had such a strong faith in him that she footed the bill for him to experience private singing lessons. He shared with his parents that he had a dream of becoming a priest in the Catholic Church, and he was already spreading the gospel to other youngsters. Up until this time, there was a shred of hope that perhaps Hitler could have turned out to be a regular guy. However, this hope was quickly shattered. However, in the year 1900, his younger brother Edmund passed away as a result of measles pneumonia. It was a fortunate coincidence that the cemetery where Edmund was laid to rest was located directly across the street from the house. As a result, he was never able to mourn in an appropriate manner and move on with his day. It was around that age that Adolf Hitler, who was just 11 years old at the time, began to experience extreme depression. Late into the night, the little child would spend a significant amount of time lounging around in the cemetery, where he would lie next to the grave of his brother. When he was alone, he would look up at the stars and talk out loud to his brother who had passed away. According to Hitler, he had a deep-seated fear of his father, and his mother was the only person he loved. The fact that this boy was in severe need of structure and discipline in his life was certainly something that Alois could sense. Tara, on the other hand, was always there to dote on him and comfort him. Unfortunately, Adolf did not have enough time to learn how to take responsibility for himself because Alois did not live long enough to see it happen. In 1903, when Adolf Hitler was only 14 years old, Alois Hitler passed away. When Adolf made the decision to stop attending high school when he was 16 years old, Clara did not raise any objections. He was permitted to become a non-educated, unemployed, or training individual NEET, which is a term that refers to someone who is not participating in education, employment, or training. His mother did not encourage him to actually do something with his life. It was previously indicated that the family belonged to the middle class. They were not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, and after his father went away, his mother was forced to adhere to a stringent financial plan. On the other hand, young adults enjoy going around town while dressed in ritzy attire and walking with a cane, acting as if they are self-sufficiently wealthy individuals who have never had to work a single day in their lives. Furthermore, his mother had inflated his ego to such an extent that he was under the impression that he was entitled to have everything simply handed to him simply due to the fact that he happened to exist. One of the residents in town inquired about the future intentions that Hitler, who is now a young adult, has for his life. The statement he made was that he will be the most talented artist in the entire planet. Even though Hitler submitted an application to study at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, Austria, he was not accepted. When I received my rejection, it came as a complete surprise to me because I had been so confident that I would be successful. He wrote, "I was so convinced that I would be successful." There is nothing particularly noteworthy about the artworks that have been attributed to Hitler. In spite of the fact that he had been practicing for years, it is evident that he had some notions of grandeur. In 1987, when I was 18 years old, Clara Hitler unfortunately passed away due to breast cancer. His mother was the person he loved the most in the entire world, and he was devastated by this news. What are your thoughts on the possibility that he might find work now that both of his parents have passed away? However, he continued to have this perplexing sense of entitlement, and he believed that he should not be required to have a job since he continued to believe that he had the potential to become Europe's most talented artist. The inheritance that Hitler's parents had left behind allowed him to live like a king in Vienna, where he had relocated. Alois stated that he had spent his entire life working in order to accumulate that kind of money for his retirement. Moreover, I use up the entire amount in a single year. As a result of this, he ran out of money to the point where he was forced to reside in homeless shelters since he was desperate for cash. In a letter to his family and friends, Hitler asked them to assist him in his endeavors to become an artist. The responses did not come as much of a surprise when one takes into account the fact that the bulk of his relatives were members of the working class. Someone advised him to look for work, but he was successful in persuading at least one of his aunts to begin sending him money to cover his fundamental need. After spending years honing his craft on a daily basis, he finally began to generate a modest income by selling watercolor drawings to local businesses and visitors. However, he knew that he would never be able to become financially independent just on his artistic endeavors. Hitler relocated to Munich, Germany, in 1913, and he continued to paint and sell his watercolors after having moved there. The beginning of World War I was accompanied by a renewed sense of pride and enthusiasm among Germans. Because it was obvious that his career as a painter was not going anywhere, he decided to enlist in the German army. As soon as he joined the military, he flourished as a result of the additional structure and discipline that was introduced into his life. No matter what he did, he never lost a great deal of confidence in himself, and this was one of the factors that contributed to his advancement through the ranks until he became a corporal. Indeed, he was of the opinion that Germany ought to have emerged victorious in the war, and he attributed their victory to the influence of Jewish propaganda. As a result of the war's conclusion in 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm I was compelled to abdicate his position as king. Article 231 of the Treaty of Versailles states that the Allied and associated governments are firm, and Germany accepts the responsibility for causing all of the loss and damage that was a consequence of the war that was imposed upon them by the aggression of Germany and their allies. In 1919, Germany established a new government that they called the Weimar Republic. In addition, they signed the Treaty of Versailles. They were not only required to give up 30% of their territory, but they were also have to pay restitution to each of the countries for the many damages that they had inflicted. In the aftermath of the war, the Weimar Republic had a difficult time dealing with the debilitating debt that was a result of the Treaty of The newly formed government, Public works projects were an attempt to generate employment opportunities, but the nation simply did not have the financial resources to pay for them. As a result, rather than accepting responsibility for their issues and making an effort to devise a solution that made sense, they attempted to take the easy way out and simply print more money. Having said that, even if you only have a fundamental understanding of how economics operates, you should be aware that printing more money means that there is more currency in circulation, which results in a decrease in the overall value of the currency. They went through a period of hyperinflation between the years 1921 and 1923, during which the value of a single United States dollar was equivalent to several trillion dollars. The individuals in command had no understanding what they were doing at the time. Kids were using stacks of money as construction blocks, and they broke it up to make kites. This was because German marks money was so worthless that it was used for this purpose. When someone wished to make a purchase at the business, they were required to bring a wheelbarrow full of cash with them at all times. Furthermore, at this point in time, Adolf Hitler had successfully obtained a position as a confidential agent working for the German army. In essence, this was a person who kept an eye on regular folks to make certain that they were not getting into any kind of trouble. The following year, in 1919, he went to a beer hall to experience the gathering of the German Workers' Party. He became aware of the fact that despite the fact that he had been dispatched as a spy, he actually fairly agreed with everything that the Workers' Party was saying. They held the Jews responsible for all of the issues that were plaguing the nation, and they desired for Germany to return to the wonderful territories that it had once inhabited. It is likely that you have realized that this group was the precursor to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which is more commonly known as the Nazis. The decision was made by Adolf Hitler to join this party. As a result of his proficiency in public speaking, he was able to persuade new members to join the organization as well. Over the course of several years, he gradually earned his way up through the ranks of the Nazi leadership. In addition, by the 8th of November in 1923, Hitler had led more than 2,000 members of the Nazi Party to the central area of Munich, where they made an effort to topple the government of Germany. This event came to be known as the Putsch in the Beer Hall. When Hitler was incarcerated, he and a large number of other demonstrators were taken into custody and charged with treason. When Hitler started writing, he began to document his life and his views. In spite of the fact that he was given a sentence of 5 years in jail, he was only incarcerated for 9 months before being released in 1925. After he was released from prison, he wrote his autobiography and titled it Mein Kampf, which literally translates to My Struggle. The book went on to become a bestseller, and as a result of the sales proceeds, Hitler eventually became a millionaire. Because of the ongoing success of the book's sales, he was able to earn $1 million annually, which is equivalent to more than $14 million in today's currency. As a result of the incompetence of the members of the government, the German people had the impression that the Weimar Republic was a complete and utter disaster. The fact that it was only a matter of time before there was another revolution was something that a lot of people could point out. Either the Communist Party or the Nazis were the organizations that thousands of people joined. On the other hand, the affluent business owners in Germany did not want the communists to gain control since they believed that this would have resulted in the destruction of capitalism. This resulted in the upper class beginning to provide financial assistance to the Nazi Party. These contributions, in addition to the sudden windfall of money that Hitler received, contributed to the expansion and improvement of the Nazi Party. In a world where there was a great deal of poverty, the Nazis appeared to be reaping the benefits of their success, and many people started to believe that it was the most viable alternative. Beginning in the 1920s and continuing until the 1930s, investigative journalists started looking into Adolf Hitler's past. He was gaining more and more notoriety in the public eye, and people were interested in learning more about him. The hypothesis that Hitler's unknown biological grandpa was actually Jewish was published in a number of different journals for publication. The assertions that this was all bogus news spread by Jews and that Hitler was actually a pure-blooded Aryan German are, of course, the most prominent of these. This is in spite of the fact that his black hair and size are a far cry from the ideal of a blonde with blue eyes and blonde hair that he cherished so much throughout his life. Hans Frank, the Nazi governor of Poland, said that he discovered evidence that Hitler's grandmother, Maria Schicklgruber, got child support payments from a Jewish man named Leopold Frankenberg. Frankenberg was the recipient of these payments. The young man was only 19 years old when he became pregnant with Maria, who was 42 years old at the time, and he did not want to marry her after that. Arafat in 2010, a DNA test indicates that Hitler did in fact have Jewish and even African ancestry, and it was evident that the German people, they were outraged, and plenty of people were attempting to come up with peaceful measures to maintain a democratic government. Arafat passed away in 2010. In 1924, a man by the name of Charles G. Dawes devised a scheme to borrow money from several banks in the United States with the intention of subsequently utilizing these loans to finance the coal industry. Through the sale of coal to France, Germany would contribute to the reduction of the country's debt. This plan was known as the Dawes Plan, and for a period of time, it was truly effective. For the first time in many years, Germany had hope of recovering from the economic crisis. The Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Charles Dawes 1 year later, in 1925. Nevertheless, in 1929, the stock market in the United States experienced a dramatic crash, and Germany was no longer able to rely on those loans from the United States. It was at this point that the Great Depression officially started. A provision in the Constitution of the Weimar Republic known as Article 48 granted the president the authority to implement any law that was in effect at the time. In 1930, President Paul von Hindenburg made a last-ditch effort to improve the state of the nation's economy with the help of Article 48, which allowed for the creation of new laws. In addition to the fact that the Nazi Party was expanding and becoming more dominant on a daily basis, there was a significant degree of public unrest. That the Nazis posed a threat to the Weimar Republic was something that President Hindenburg was able to recognize. In light of this, he came to the conclusion that the only way to preserve democracy in Germany was for the various parties to collaborate. In the year 1933, he appointed Adolf Hitler to the position of Chancellor of Germany. Only 4 weeks later, on February 27, 1933, the Reichstag Parliament building was set on fire. This occurred on the 27th of February. This was something that Hitler claimed was done by the communists, and he also claimed that he was the one who persuaded President Hindenburg to pass legislation that prohibited peaceful protest and freedom of the press. In spite of the fact that this was nothing more than a scheme to remove the Communist Party from Germany, a significant number of people are under the impression that the Nazis were the ones responsible for the arson. The Night of the Long Knives was initiated by Hitler and his devoted followers, he and Rich Himmler and Hermann Göring. During the summer of 1934, they carried out a major coup by assassinating the most influential members of the Weimar Republic. In the beginning, Hitler began to outlaw all of the labor unions and made it unlawful for any other political parties to exist. At this point, the only option available to the German citizen was to unquestionably become a Nazi. His Third Reich was an empire that was ostensibly supposed to last for 1,000 years. This was his Third Reich. Hitler's speeches were replete with exaggerated statements and phrases. In addition to making ludicrous assertions about the future of Nazi Germany, he stated that everything was the best it could possibly be. Numerous individuals, when they consider the past, are perplexed as to how the German people could have let something like this to take. How could they have been so naive as to hand such a large amount of authority to a single insane individual? You should try to put yourself in the position of the German for a moment. You are at all-time lows, There is not the slightest possibility that you will be able to provide for your family or discover any significance in your life or endeavors. You are suddenly confronted by a man who exudes self-assurance, and he manages to persuade you that you are unique. You are a member of this enchanted master race, and he is fully aware of who is to blame for all of your issues as well as the means by which to resolve them. The Germans, on the other hand, were completely and utterly taken in by it. The plan that Hitler devised to strengthen the economy of Germany was precisely the same way that he had made money during his whole life. Instead of putting in the effort to earn it, simply put, he was going to take it away from the individuals who had put in a lot of effort to actually work on it. His first edict was to raise the wages of the German people by 10.9, which immediately made everyone delighted. This was one of his first decrees. After that, he made the announcement that he would reduce the amount of trade that Germany had with other countries, and instead direct all of the country's resources into the expenditure of money on the military because they were going to restore Germany's greatness and glory. Germany was in the same state of financial ruin as it had been in the past, and the money that it needed to borrow had to come from somewhere. Hitler was under the impression that if they conquered other nations, they would be able to seize the wealth of other nations and utilize that money to administer the Third Reich. Consequently, if you are going to steal from someone, why not begin with the wealthiest people in Europe? The homes of Jewish people were pillaged, and their valuable artwork, gold, and property were taken away. After that, he moved on to the ethnic cleansing of the Sinti and Roma people for no other reason than the fact that they were vagabonds and gypsies, which he did not like to have in his presence. Hitler came to the conclusion that he would entirely disregard the limitations that were imposed on Germany by the Treaty of AC. As was noted before, Germany had lost 13% of its territory. Nonetheless, he was of the opinion that this ideal Aryan race required a great deal of space in order to establish itself. This was what he referred to as the Lebensraum, which literally translates to living space, and he had the intention of expanding German colonies all over the world. Hitler made the decision to pick and choose which Jews he believed were deserving of life, despite the fact that he insisted that he intended to wipe out all Jews throughout history. A Jewish physician by the name of Edward Bloch, who had cured his mother's breast cancer, was the recipient of his gratitude. Bloch and his wife were escorted out of Austria in a secure manner on their way out. Emil Maurice, Hitler's personal driver, was also part Jewish, and yes, he was still permitted to join the SS because they had been friends for years. This was due to the fact that they had traveled together. In 1936, Hitler signed a deal to join forces with Italy, which was ruled by Benito Mussolini. This was evidence of Hitler's continuous efforts to recruit friends who shared his beliefs. While this was going on, Japan was engaged in an invasion of China, and both countries had the same goal of expanding their empire by acquiring territory. As a result, they joined the Axis powers as well. The three countries started working on their plan to establish a new world order. A significant reduction in expenses was achieved by the Nazis as a result of the concentration camps, which provided them with a source of free slave labor. Throughout its existence, the Third Reich continued to amass more authority over the course of the years. As a result of the decision of a single individual to take everything that he could ever want for himself, millions of people were losing their lives, and he was successful in persuading others to follow his lead. In 1925, when Hitler had become affluent as a result of the sales of Mein Kampf, he arranged for his older half-sister, Angela Roebel, to move into his home with her children. She then became his maid. One of his nieces, Galia Raab, who was 17 years old, was the object of his obsession. On the other hand, all of her acquaintances would say that they had always believed that the only close relationship they had was with their niece and uncle. Also, a great number of historians have gone so far as to assert that Gili was the woman he loved the most in the world. When he was 19 years old, she started having an affair with Hitler's half-Jewish chauffeur, Emil Maurice. This affair was kept a secret. The moment Hitler learned that he was furious and that Maurice had been sacked, he dispatched his sister, Angela, and their children to live in a large house that he had purchased in order to get them away from the city. In light of the fact that Gitti was studying medical school in Munich, Hitler proposed that she continue to reside in the apartment with him independently. It was forbidden for her to have any friends by Hitler. She made herself a prisoner in the quarters, and he would not let her leave the school grounds unless there was a chaperone there. He would not let her go any place else. Hitler hired a driver and Nazi bodyguards even before he became Chancellor of Germany. These individuals were also present to ensure that Hitler was never able to escape from his surroundings. She asked if she might go on a trip to Vienna to begin taking singing lessons in 1923, when he was now 23 years old. She wanted to begin taking singing lessons. It should come as no surprise that Hitler did not allow her to depart. In the end, Gilly lost his cool, which led to a heated altercation between the two of them. Gilly made the announcement that she had fallen in love with a young man when they were attending classes together at the medical school, and that they were now engaged to be married throughout the fight. When she wanted to be with her fiancé, she insisted that he let her leave the apartment so that she could be with him. A gunshot wound to the chest was discovered on the body of Gilly, which was discovered the next morning in a bedroom. In her hands, she was clutching the gun that Hitler had used. It was determined to be suicidal. However, plenty of others believed that Hitler's envy got the better of him and that he murdered his niece because she had so much to live for. This is because she had so much to live for. It is widely believed by historians that this event marked a significant turning point in Hitler's life. This is due to the fact that it would have been the first time that Hitler committed murder outside of the war. One of Hitler's long-term relationships was with a lady named Eva Braun, but historians have been able to establish love links to 8 different women during his life. However, Hitler only had one girlfriend. During a Nazi Party meeting in 1929, he crossed paths with Gilly, who had passed away in the same year. There was a significant age gap between them, but despite the fact that he was 40 years old and Eva was only 17 years old, they were immensely drawn to each other. Hitler asserts that she was his confidential secretary and that he concealed the fact that they were romantically involved. It was important to him that the relationship be of a casual nature so that he could continue to be single and have the freedom to sleep with other women whenever he pleased. On the other hand, even Braun was deeply in love with Hitler, and the fact that he refused to accept that she was his girlfriend was a source of great grief for all of us. In the year 1932, she made an effort to end her life by shooting herself in the chest. It would appear that she reproduced the events that had transpired with his niece on purpose, since she was aware that it would elicit an emotional reaction from him. However, it did not manage to penetrate her heart, and she immediately sought medical assistance. In the event that this was an elaborate attempt to attract attention, it was successful because he approached her at the hospital bedside with a bouquet of roses and told her that he loved her. He was content with the fact that her guilt trip was successful. Eva Braun persisted in behaving in the manner of the headstrong and lovesick adolescent that she actually was. When she ate by herself, she would set up images of Hitler during meals so that she might deceive herself into thinking that he was also present. Even the attention that Hitler paid to his dog Blondie caused him to feel envious or even resentful. There were rumors that she would kick the dog if he went close to her, but Hitler could never consider Eva to be anything other than one of his many mistresses by any stretch of the imagination. Despite her best efforts, he never showed her the love and attention that she desired. In 1935, she made another attempt at ending her life, this time by taking an excessive amount of sleeping tablets. She stated that if Hitler did not want to reveal his secret affairs, they have to live together in his bunker. She also authorized her to stay as long as they slept in separate bedrooms. This was after she had recovered from her illness. Eventually, after a period of time marked by death and destruction, World War II came to an end, and the Allies emerged victorious. On the 30th of April in 1945, Soviet forces were getting closer and closer to the bunker that Hitler had constructed. At long last, he consented to marry Braun, but only on the condition that she also consented to a death pact with him. She gladly agreed, and she attended their wedding wearing a dress that was black in color. It was Joseph Goebbels. In addition to being the best man, he presided over the private ceremony and also served as the executor of his will and testament. Hitler made a desire that his body be burned after he passed away following his death. The Russians, upon storming the bunker, found that his skull and other bone fragments had survived the flames. They also found that his skull had been preserved. The Soviet Union did not permit anyone else to have access to Hitler's remains for a number of years. Due to the fact that the bodies that were found inside the bunker may have been anyone's, there were a lot of people who believed that they did not have any genuine evidence that Hitler had actually passed away. It was because of this that rumors began to circulate that he might still be alive. In order to start a new life in Argentina and a German colony called the History Channel devoted an episode of the series Mystery Quest to the topic of Hitler's escapes. Some people believe that he had escaped in a submarine in order to begin a new life in Argentina. It is necessary to provide a detailed explanation of how he could have been able to accomplish this. Obviously, there are also many more bizarre conspiracy theories that are floating around, such as the one that asserts that the Nazis established a space colony on the dark side of the moon. Examples of such beliefs include, no way. Because of how ludicrous the concept was, it was adapted into a comedy film that was given the name Iron Sky. In 2008, however, scientists arrived at the conclusion that the teeth that were taken from the skull in Russia were, in fact, those of Hitler. This was due to the fact that the teeth matched his dental records. Once and for all, the people will be able to find closure and understand that he did, in fact, pass away in that bunker in the year 1945. Since the Nazi Party was made illegal in Germany, it was even unlawful to read his autobiography, Mein Kampf, until very recently. This restriction was in place until very recently. The unfortunate reality is that Nazism is not fully disappearing. It was never made illegal in the United States of America, and as a result, the neo-Nazi movement had a resurgence in popularity.